Welcome back to the Becoming Relentless podcast. I am your host, Eleanor McCabe, IFBB Bikini Pro and Team Mahaley Coach, and I'm joined by my lovely co-hosts,
Cecily Wesh, Team Mahaley Coach.
And Danielle Kusenberger, Team Mahaley Coach.
And today we have a very special guest with us. I'm super excited for you guys to get to know her.
Alexa Rukstela. Hey.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Alexa, tell us about yourself.
So I guess like the big thing of why I'm here today is my fancy master's degree in exercise science. And I also do bodybuilding coaching. So that's kind of like my two masters, I guess you would say, that I serve right now. It's really, really fun for me to see both sides.
So how did you get into like exercise science, wanting to study that further?
Oof. So like long story short, my mom actually was like a massive bodybuilder when I was like 12 or 13. And she would like wake me up at 5 a.m. and be like, we're going to the gym. I remember just like doing the chin-ups with like 140 pounds. I was like, this is so fun. I was like,
I'm strong.
Yeah. I was like, Mom, I'm doing 140 pounds. And she's like, okay, sweetie. So yeah, I kind of just like picked it up from her. And then she got kind of like sick in high school and couldn't like lift anymore. So I kind of just like started doing it for the both of us and fell in love with it for myself. And now it's just been like my life's passion. So
That's super cool.
yeah.
How long have you been competing?
My first competition was in 2018. I was 18. So I can't really say that I'm new anymore, but it still feels like I'm still like in the beginning of my journey. So
Heavily. How old are you now?
23.
Okay, dope.
Yeah.
Young. We're all young.
Still young.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
And honestly, like with that amount of time, like we are still like in our beginning stages.
Yeah.
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 I agree. I feel like even if you started and you're at 18 and you're in like competing world for 5 years, like since you're so young, like you're still young, and muscle maturity and all that, like it's just
Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Shit takes time.
I'm like, I'm going to look good in my 30s. That's what we're going for.
Yeah.
Like the density.
The
yeah.
pinnacle.
Yeah.
But
Fine wine. Yeah.
yeah, and like the fact that we're all starting now, we're gonna look good in our 30s.
Yes.
And we're going to age like so well.
Yeah.
Yeah. We set ourselves up for a hot girl 30 age.
Hot girl 30s.
Yeah, hot girl 30.
I love that. That's funny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So then after you competed, when did you start getting into coaching? Was it?
That was like more of a gradual piece. It was more like I was like taking certifications because I was really excited to learn more about it for myself, and then just sharing more.
Oh, you're good.
Sharing more about it like on my like social media and stuff like that, and like my perspectives. And then it just kind of like evolved eventually into more of like a coaching piece. I never really knew what I wanted to do. It was like, oh, like I could go this direction, or I could do like coaching or research, or like work with like a supplement company or something. And I'm still kind of like figuring out where I like exactly fit in. But yeah, at some point it was just like, I love this so much and I feel like I can help people. So now that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Do you do in person as well?
Not
And
right now,
online?
no.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. Do you want to stay on online coaching?
Honestly, I would be fine going wherever. Like I love to meet people and like talk in person. So I feel like you lose a little bit of that online,
Yeah.
especially when it's like 1-minute videos and everything is like so short. So I love like the longer form pieces of like getting to know someone and like meeting the person in front of you. So I could definitely see that like makes a comeback at some point too.
I was gonna say, because like you're kind. Like you're
Oh, thank
super
you.
kind. Like that's the first thing I noticed from you. And I was like, wow, I bet she does in-person coaching because of your communication skills and how kind you are and soft-spoken. But so I'm surprised that you don't.
Yeah, no, I just haven't gotten around there. I've moved around a lot, so I feel like that's also been a little bit difficult. Usually when you have people, it makes it harder to leave.
Yeah. That's very
That's
true.
true.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, let's get started to the
Yeah.
research.
Yeah.
I'm excited for this. I'm really excited for this. So we're going to talk about research in bodybuilding. And I'll just let you take the floor. We'll ask our questions as they pop up. But
Yeah.
how did you get into it? What have you done? What do you think about research in bodybuilding?
Yeah. So I basically just got started with my research journey. I've only been doing it for a couple of years since I just got my master's from USF. I worked under Dr. Bill Campbell. You guys probably know a little bit about him. He's like the protein guy.
He does on Instagram, he does like the A through D, like true or false.
like the true or false.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's an amazing scientist and communicator. And one thing that he really taught me is like he's always asking coaches, like, what do you guys do? What does the research like not show?
Mhm.
And like then he uses that to like fuel his research. So a lot of his stuff is kind of like supporting what we already know to be true, which is nice because then we can at least like have the science to back it up. And that's kind of, I guess, where I got my like first idea for my study, which is it's still kind of going on. It's almost in the completion of like publication, but it was like the concept of like, like science and anecdote usually like don't blend. Like there's like this like evidence-based camp, and then there's like, oh, research doesn't know anything camp, and they're usually like this. It's like, what if we like brought those together and like asked coaches, you know, like, what are you doing? Like, what are you seeing happen in real time in the field? And then directly compare that to what's happening in the evidence-based field. So for example, we had like 4 different categories. So like supplements, PEDs, protein, and cardio. And just like, hey, what do you think about this? How often do you use, just like diving, I guess, like into it. Like the big piece was like PEDs. So like research-wise, there's not a whole lot on bodybuilders. You know, it's usually like clinical populations, so people with cancer or HIV, or very like rare diseases like Turner's disease. So we don't get to see a lot of healthy populations, especially people who are trying to get jacked. So, and then when you look at the research, if it is in those populations just saying don't do it, it's not trying to like further see like, okay, I accept people are going to do these things. So like, how can we help them and make sure that they stay safe?
And the dosages in those studies are very different than bodybuilding because like when you look at the research for cancers or whatever disease that they're studying, the dosages that they're giving are massive. Like at the studies that I looked at, it was like they were giving women incredibly large doses of like primobolan or Winstrol, and it was like 99% viralization, like all the subjects.
Well, of course.
Yeah. And it's just like, well, that study isn't applicable to what we're doing in bodybuilding. So it is really difficult. So I love that that's where your research is going. I think it's very, very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to see like more research come out around those areas so we can actually like help people instead of being like, don't do this or you're going to have like viralization. It's like, okay, like that's not like that. I feel like a lot of people like aren't caring about that as much. And there is like not a whole lot of emphasis placed on like actual internal pieces, especially for females, which I feel like is a big problem. Like I had someone reach out to me and be like, hey, do you want to do a study on like female viralization? And I'm like, I actually feel like there's a ton of research on that already. Why don't we like look at it from a different angle? And it's also just difficult because there is like the illegality portion. And there is also, when you look at like coaches or you look at what people are doing, they keep it very close to the chest because there is a lot of taboo and sometimes like shame and judgment around it. Like I'm sure that you have all experienced some level of that at some point, which is really sad. But with that, people tend, people tend to, you know, kind of like hide away and don't want to like disclose it. So I feel like research could be a lot better at being accepting and compassionate and like actually listening to understand instead of like judging, be like, oh, this is what we know, so I'm going to fit you into this box now.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you know why a lot of like people who research don't ask bodybuilders straight up, like don't mix the two like you're doing?
Yeah, I think that there is a bit of, to say it like nice, I think it's just difficult for them to get along in certain ways. Like if we look at the types of research that bodybuilders typically do, it's either like a case study. So it's like one person doing their own prep. Like we did that with another one of the studies that I'm on, just like one bikini athlete case study. And then you'll also see like observational studies. So it's like, okay, I'm going to have you come in and I'm just going to like measure your muscles and see like, you know, your body fat percentage, all of that kind of stuff. Or there's also what I did with the coaches, like survey research. And it's very difficult to get people to come in and do interventions. That's like, Danielle, come in and I'm going to have you do like half the amount of protein that you usually do. And then Cecily, I'm going to have you come in and do double. It's like, Danielle, you probably don't want to do that. You're like, I'm not just going to willingly like decrease my protein. Like why? Like that doesn't benefit you. So usually they're in the intervention studies, we don't see people wanting to give up their protocols for research, which is understandable, but it's also like difficult because then we have the research people being like, this is what we have access to. So it's like college students or clinical populations or overweight people. So like not our population per se, which is a very easy limitation for people to be like, oh, we don't care about research, you know? But at the same time, it's like, oh, we would love to have more research on bodybuilders, but I don't want to do it.
That makes a lot of sense. I didn't even, like, that makes total sense. I didn't even think about that, but now that you put it in that way, I'm not down.
Like mid-prep, like, oh, we want to do a study on a bikini competitor 6 weeks out, but you have to come in and you have to not follow your protocols. It's like, people aren't going to want to do that.
Also, like, the people that, no offense, I'm just gonna say, the people that do like say, yeah, let's do it. Like you're not competing to win because you're just slashing yourself. Like you're asking for yourself to lose. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and there's so many different body types. Like if you were to say like cut my protein in half and like double hers, like, well, first of all, Seth
Cecily
would blow the
handle
fuck
it
up.
like a champ.
I would turn into an asparagus here. Yeah.
You would
So-
see no difference in Seth, like increased muscle mass.
Yeah. And I would just dwindle away. But like, if you were to double mine and double hers, like I would still think you would probably grow way more than me.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
your digestion would
Yeah. Your
completely-
digestion would
Yeah.
be gone.
Yeah.
I would be
Yours
happy
deep,
over
just
here.
fucked up. Yeah. That would be horrible. Yeah, my anxiety through the roof.
Yep.
And even things like peak week studies, you know, it's like, okay, we're going to try to do this type of peak with you. It's like, imagine that, like you've done this for like 20 plus weeks, and then some random person's going to come in and be like, I think this works theoretically. We're going to try it on these 10 people, and then we're going to try something different. It's like, no one wants to chance that for their
Yeah.
shows,
Yeah.
which is like completely understandable. So I think the best thing moving forward with research is going to be things like case studies. So there are there's like 14 case studies on bodybuilders, most of them male, I would say. There are like a few female, usually like figure a couple of bikini athletes, I think. But there isn't any with like PEDs. So I think it's also really interesting that all of the naturals have kind of been like open to this experience and being like tracked and having some blood work taken and coming in at 5 a.m. doing these RMR, resting metabolic rate tests. And, you know, I noticed some of my colleagues who do research are trying to do research with people who are on PEDs. They're very like hesitant to come in. They really, really don't want to be documented. So I would actually don't know why that would be. I'm not sure if you guys have any
Do you
ideas.
think so when you ask them to come in, the people that are on PEDs, like, do they not want to, are you asking them to come in to like change their protocols or just
No.
ask questions?
Yeah, so
I would
think-
come in, ask me.
Yeah.
I've been on PEDs, I'm on PEDs, like ask me kind of thing.
I think it's the shame. What
Yeah,
were you gonna say?
I think it's like the stigma around PEDs, and like a lot of people don't want to be open with their use, and like even if they like admit to taking PEDs, they don't want to disclose how much they're taking, which I understand. But and maybe like I think another side of it could also potentially be fear, because you are like testing all of their health values, right? And so I think ignorance is bliss in a sense. And so people like to kind of, they know that what they're probably doing isn't the healthiest. And so they don't want to know that further, like know exactly how messed up they are in the moment. So I feel like that could be a big issue of why people don't want to go in.
No, I only laughed because you said how messed up.
I know.
That's a very factual.
Well, it's so true. Like, I was talking with a competitor this morning. She's natural. She's my friend. She's on prep. And she was saying she felt really good. And I was like, you know what? Like, I am too. Like, I'm currently natural. We're not running anything yet. But I was like, I feel very healthy. And I'm at that point in prep where it is like 12 weeks out. So it's like the healthy mark. But once we start pushing and I add in the PEDs, I don't know whether it's the push and like the protocols or if it's the PEDs that end up making me feel the way that I end up feeling. Like,
yeah.
Can
do you know what I
elaborate
mean?
on that? Like, how do you end up feeling? Like, I'm curious, like, what that experience is like for you.
It's hard to explain because I don't know which one it is. I think it's both. And I think it's knowing that PEDs add a toxic load to my body. I know that. Like, I'm well versed in PEDs and their effects on me. I also know the pros, which is why I use PEDs, because I think ultimately at the end of the day, it helps keep me healthier in the long run when we are pushing to the extreme like that. But I know, like, my liver's probably not happy. My kidneys are not happy. Depending on what I'm using, like my heart is probably not very happy. It's being asked to do a lot of work. And I think that contributes to like mentally how I feel sometimes. But I also, like, being natural for this long has also felt kind of weird. So
Okay, I know you have
So,
something to say.
Question: have you ran PEDs like in like a not prep phase that you can like remember?
yes, and I didn't like it.
You didn't like it. You
Yeah.
didn't like how you felt. Interesting.
Isn't that
is
interesting?
Because I will say I feel different with almost, well, I feel, so I was natural until last week for like, I don't know, 4 months. And and I feel better starting, and it was very low. Like I'm very low right now.
That is interesting.
But my when I came off my last cycle, I was on a long-term cycle. So I came off and I was like, okay, like I feel good health-wise. But at the last month, so 4 months into being natural again, I definitely felt very natural. Like I felt the difference heavily.
Can you also elaborate? I'm just curious, like what that like means for you. Like you feel like you felt better. Like what does better mean for you? Like what does that look like?
I would say I feel better now. But when I say I feel more natural, I was also I was having cardio. So I was 10 weeks out. I'm not 10 weeks out anymore. So I had cardio every morning. Like I was dieting, but it wasn't a hard diet. It was just like I had my high days and my low days. My low days were hard. Training was just harder. The pumps weren't there as well. Like it was just connection wasn't as good. So when I'm on PDs, like right now, my connection's really good. My pumps, my fullness throughout the day is much better. And they last throughout the week. And I just feel mentally more motivated. And it could be, I think large part of it right now is because I feel so much better day to day with having more pumps. So I feel more solid, like I have more muscle density, which plays a part mentally because I know I need to build muscle density. So mentally, I feel better because of that.
You feel like you can see the progress that you're making better.
Like a validation?
Well,
almost?
right now I can feel it. I don't see it any like right now at all. It's only 2 weeks in. It's just look in the mirror. Oh yeah.
But you can feel like the muscle fullness.
You can feel
like
it.
you feel like more round, more full.
Yeah. Like I texted Jay earlier and I was like, man, like my glutes still feel good from Monday, and I train legs Monday, and like you can still feel the fullness throughout your physique.
Gotcha.
And it's just a nice feeling. Like I love feeling that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You feel stronger.
Yeah.
Because of it.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I will say, like, when I start up a cycle and I start seeing that as well, like the strength, the recovery, the pumps, and you just feel like jacked. I think it's a mental thing for me where I'm like, yeah, like I feel really good right now. But I think also like on the back end of that, if I'm doing a long cycle, I know I'm like, man, it's long. Like, and I'm more susceptible to being like, okay, what is this doing to me?
So I haven't like tried this on myself. Well, Justin hasn't tried it on me. But like I've been in both camps. I've run really long cycles both in an off season and during a prep. I did when I came off my last cycle, I did initially feel like a lot healthier. And I think that my last cycle we ran for, I'm not going to give how many. I can't even remember how many weeks. It was a pretty long cycle. But what I started to do with my athletes, and kind of, I think Justin has started doing this more, but like, I think it's always like the first 6 weeks you feel really good.
Yeah.
And then that's when you start to see, that's like when your body can start shutting down, or like, you know, it's around that 6 week out mark. So what I've been doing is I'm cycling my girls 6 weeks on, 4 weeks off, 6 weeks on, 4 weeks off, and then like tapering the dosages as needed through that. And I'm finding that they're feeling a lot better and they're staying a lot healthier this way. And we're seeing really good results because it also kind of builds in like okay, we're in the 6 week mark. We can push super hard. Like if we were like in a mini cut or like even in a growth phase, we can push everything super hard. 4 weeks, we lay off the gas for a little bit. And then we can go back to pushing super hard once we're in that. It's kind of like, it's a nice cycle where it keeps everything kind of in balance and in rhythm, I'm finding.
I like that a lot. And I think we've kind of talked about it too, or Jay's talked about it, where it prevents like complete shutdown of their systems, which is ideal. Like that's where we want to be. Yeah.
And it does vary, like for the audience, from what you're taking and the dosage.
The compound.
But I will say I do like that a lot. Yeah.
I'm finding a lot of my girls are really liking it. So I'm also not on anything right now, so I'm hoping that we get to do that here pretty soon.
Did you guys hear my question at coffee on Tuesday? Like low key, I was like,
you slid it in.
Can we do that? Like so low key.
Dude, I do that all the time. Any comment, this is what I want.
I was like, let me just plant the seed now. Because
you have not taken anything, correct?
No.
I didn't think so. Yeah.
Didn't think so.
No. That's not what I mean. Oh my god.
Not in a bad way. Yes.
The reason why it's because the questions that were being asked, I felt like the way they presented were like you haven't experienced the PEDs in that way. That's why I assumed when you asked me to like dig deeper into how I was feeling, the differences in how I was feeling, I was like, oh, she probably hasn't taken anything.
Yeah, I think it's also just interesting to see like how different people interpret like different things, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So I'm sure that like your feeling of like what that feels like for you like internally is probably like a little bit different than like Noah or Cecily, for example. So I like to know like the words behind it because like or the actual like emotion behind it, I guess. It helps me just like relate to you, I guess, on that level.
I agree. And I do think I was gonna say the age might be something too. But we're still really close in age.
Girl.
We are. I turned 27 in 2 days.
Hey.
Happy early birthday.
Yeah.
26 club
Hey.
for now.
Heck yeah.
If I do a very long cycle, then I definitely feel healthier when I come off. But if I like the short and the 6 weeks and then on and 4 weeks off, like that's mentally and physically you do feel better from that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would be curious, just kind of like drawing it a little bit back to the research, like what you guys' perspective of research is, because I'm sure that there's like a blend, you know, like there's some things just like, like evidence-based research like supports this. And there are other things like, nah, like they don't know what they're talking about yet.
So I would say like when it comes to like research, I'm very much someone that likes to look at all of it and then come to my own conclusions. So I don't really like to base everything off of like one study or I like to take all the studies and then kind of form my opinion around it and then also my own knowledge. That's kind of how I generally come to conclusions because while like in every study, I think there's always outliers and there's certain things where it's like it could point you to one direction. And so I think that having a more overview of like research, that's generally how I like to view it.
I agree. And I do think it helps me as a coach apply that mindset towards having such variety of athletes.
Yes, because each person's different. And just because it works on like some people, it's not going to work on everyone else.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think I'm also curious how you guys interpret research as far as PEDs go, because that's kind of like where the conversation was. Because I can imagine when I read some of the research, I read it from like the perspective of someone who would be on PEDs. And honestly, I think it reads sometimes a little bit disrespectful and insensitive. So I'm also curious if that maybe like, if that resonates with any of you, whenever you guys, if you've read any of like the research on like athletes who use PEDs, like in my opinion, it can come across very like disrespectful, like especially when they're talking about like dead bodybuilders, for example. Like that's a common topic right now that I think could be done with more grace and understanding. But yeah, I'm just curious if any of you have read anything that like, and you have any like feelings when you read them.
Well, I will say like the most recent top bodybuilders that have passed away because of like things like from PEDs, like it is more so on the dose and what they're using. Like what we're using and the doses that we have, we're not putting ourselves in that place to like wake up and experience issues like death or anything, like a heart attack or anything like that. I have read some stuff and I do agree some of it is like disrespectful, but I haven't read that much variety of different stuff.
Yeah. Because I can see when I read it, it's like, oh, I wouldn't want someone to like analyze me if this is like how they're going to speak. And I understand that science needs to be detached, you know, and that it's not supposed to be sensitive writing. Like I understand, but it's like if we're actually trying to help people, which it should be the purpose of everything that we do in general, like full stop.
Yes.
Then this isn't actually like helping anyone. It's not like reaching people in the way that it could be or should be. You know?
It's almost like it's fear mongering as opposed to like actually educating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And I will say there's some people out there that will read a piece of research and
that's the Bible.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they're like,
that's all it is.
Yep. And I do think maybe some people that write that piece of research know that. And so they're just targeting that audience. So they get people to like believe exactly what they wrote.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the perspectives that I have, because it's like I do coach and I do have my own anecdotes and my ideas that aren't supported by research. And I also like have the research piece where it's like we're held to like such a high standard, you know, and we have to like list out every single limitation in the study. It's like, this is why my study sucks. Here's all the reasons that you can tear it apart. And it's like people like jump on that. Like you should see some of the people in the research space. But it's also like I can see both perspectives. I can see both sides, because we have the IRB where we need to be very, very cautious with people's health, with people's autonomy, and like what we can and cannot do to people, obviously. It's not the 1940s anymore. And then that's also like severely limiting sometimes. And on the other perspective, it's like, as a coach, it's like for me, I use research almost as like a highway, right? It's like it'll get you like most of the way you want to go, but if you have like this home address pumped in, you got to get off and like go on some routes and some smaller roads and avenues to eventually get there, which is like where the anecdote comes in. So it's like we start here and then eventually go somewhere else. And then being in the space, it's like, oh, like why do you do that then? And it's like, well, sometimes I don't know. You know, sometimes I don't have the whole methodology and everything like tailored out to a T. But that's like the creative aspect of coaching. Like it is an art and a science, and that can be pulled away in both perspectives, I think, from like the anecdotal camp and the evidence-based pieces.
I like that. I like the highway example. That was super cool and easy to follow. And I also agree, like coaching is really creative. Like with every athlete's so different. Every prep's so different. Like Sess and I have never been on the same PED cycle and never will, and we don't have the same goal. Actually, we both want to grow those glutes.
Yes.
But like everything's we all want to grow those glutes. But everyone's just so different. That's why I love hearing like, what are you doing? Like with your training, like with all of y'all, like everything. Yeah.
It's fun to learn from each other in that way, but then it is anecdotal. Like we are all learning and like sharing information. But then if you were to ask me like, well, where's the research behind angling your foot that way? It's like, I don't know if there's research, but I do it because I feel it.
I would
like,
just say try it and you're going to agree.
Give it a go, give it a try.
And I think that was like the biggest thing that I wanted to do with my study that's like going to publication right now in the bodybuilding coaches is it's like I wanted to highlight like, hey, here are all the pieces that isn't supported by research right now. It doesn't mean that like these are like bro science bodybuilders or bodybuilding coaches who have no idea what they're doing. It just means that like, hey, we haven't had a whole lot of research on fasted cardio in this population. And like we have the rationale behind why they do it. So it's like maybe they're using compounds that we haven't even considered in science. You know, it's like maybe we haven't even like combined all of these pieces and they're just like ahead of the curve, which usually they are. I will say a lot of the things it's like, you know, like, oh, like we can't have this much protein. And then coaches are like, bet. And then like 10 years later,
240 grams.
We're going to crank it even.
And then like 10 years later, it's like, oh, well, maybe we can. So it's that fine line. So that was what I really wanted to do with this study is be like, okay, like this is what's being done in the trenches right now. How can we open these doors to have more I guess like support for them in the future for things like fasted cardio and some like health supplements. And then hopefully at some point we can find a way to utilize like PED research. 'Cause I think that is so important, especially because everyone keeps everything so close to the chest like we were all talking about. Like even now it's like, oh, you know, I'm taking some stuff. It's like, and I love what you said about like the 6 weeks on, 4 weeks off. Like that's probably like the most in-depth that I've heard from like someone, to be honest, outside of like, I guess like there are some podcasts where people will talk about it, but you don't like, I would love to see that in a study, you know, it's like, even though it's like, there is like an illegality portion of it. So there are pieces that we can't necessarily do.
Okay, I'll
What's
say
going
one
on?
thing.
Yeah, you did.
I'm like,
I think we were both
All of you wanted to go.
Yeah, I will say I'm totally open with talking about anything PEDs, like in depth, like what I'm taking, what I have taken, like all of it. There is nothing that I'm not won't share.
So mine was similar, but I was going to say my only reservation is I would never want to put out
The dose.
my cycles or my compounds, or like I don't want to get too detailed because I would hate for somebody to listen to this and be like, well, she's a bikini pro, I want to be a bikini pro, so I'm going to do XYZ. Because I just feel like I have a responsibility to, I guess, protect people from their own
It's like following a diet. You can follow my diet, but you're not going to look like me.
Exactly. You can follow my exact protocols, but you're still not going to look like me. But I think with PEDs, people think they're magic. And it's probably because like it's a vicious cycle because there's not enough information. So it seems very secretive. So then anytime there is information, people are like, they like glean onto it. Yeah. And they want to do it. So it perpetuates itself.
I will say that there is like, in the research space, I would say that it is sometimes like portrayed as magic. Like there is like this one study back in like, I don't know, like the 90s or something like that, where they had these 4 groups of people. There was like one group who just took PEDs and didn't exercise. There was one group that exercised and didn't take PEDs. There was a control, so they did nothing. And then there was the 4th group who exercised and did PEDs. And the group who did PEDs and didn't exercise gained more muscle than the people who just exercised and didn't take PEDs. So it's like, as a natural competitor, you could like look at that and be like, damn. So I think that it can sometimes look like that in like the research space. So I can definitely understand like the reservations around sharing all of those things, especially if it's like you kind of like take that responsibility on as a pro, which I really like admire about you. And at the same time, it's also like, if someone is on their first cycle and they don't know what a low dose is, what a high dose is, like what like a not nice compound for them might be, that can be very confusing because everyone's keeping it all together. You know, it's like, I don't know if this compound is like good for me. My coach said to do it, and it's like I chose my coach for a reason, so this should be good. And then years down the road, it's like maybe that wasn't the best decision. So I think with like the research that I would love to do and love to see moving forward is like more transparency, but I think it requires like a lot more trust on the side of the bodybuilders and also a lot more sensitivity and understanding on the side of the researchers.
Yeah. I do think it's safe, like if someone were if we were to, or someone were to share like their PEDs, like it's safer to share what you took versus how much you took. Yeah.
That was one of the questions that we did ask in the survey is like, what would you expect from a low level athlete in a range? Like all of the questions were very open ended. Like usually in survey research, it's like click this multiple choice thing. But it's like I did not want any bodybuilders to feel like boxed in. It's like, well, this is like not what I do for all my athletes. You can make the range as high or as low as you want, and I can't like disclose the results because of copyright reasons. But I can say that the range was massive for even for like lower levels. Like a huge range, and we asked for both male and female, which is going to be really interesting when it comes out too. So I think just like having that little bit of information, so it's like, okay, like all of these coaches, like we had some coaches who were like lower level, just like regional coaches, and then we had some people who had Olympians on stage. So it's like have a very even mix of people. You can be like, okay, like the conglomerate of these coaches said that like these 5 compounds were like their favorites. It's not like, a Bible by any means, but it is a start at least.
Yeah.
That is very cool.
Yeah.
I'm so
I'm excited. Yeah.
I know. I was like, can you share more? But you can't. So I'm just waiting.
off camera.
That's funny. I'm really excited for that to come out.
I think it's going to be the first of hopefully very, very many because I think it's important research that needs to come out.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think we are at like a turning point where people are like, okay, like something does need to change somewhere because it seems like it's getting like a little bit like more divided sometimes.
That, and I feel like PEDs are becoming more and more mainstream, like in a sense for not even just like people who are bodybuilders, but just people who are like in the gym. Like I'm seeing it a lot in like younger kids too. So I do hope that like with this research, people are going to become more knowledgeable and there's going to be more awareness around like, not necessarily like the right and the wrong way to do it, but basically like, here's the more optimal path to take if you're going to choose to do this.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like sex ed, like that whole thing where it's like for so long we just pushed abstinence, but then teenage pregnancy skyrocketed. And it's like, okay, instead of saying like, don't do PEDs or don't have sex, it's like, accept that it's going to happen. People are going to have sex at 14. It's going to happen. Do we like it? Maybe not, but whatever. But then like same thing with PEDs. Obviously, please do not do PEDs like that young. But if it happens, like maybe there will be research out there or maybe there will be more resources out there so that they can understand better like what you're potentially risking.
Yeah, that's like a big concept is like informed consent, like knowing what you're getting yourself into. And not in a way that like, oh, you're getting yourself into something. You gotta like, you gotta know it. But it's like, no, like this is like this is everything. Like here it is on a silver platter for you. Make your decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Informed consent. Yep.
Yes.
What's your favorite thing to research within bodybuilding?
I think I'm shifting a little bit more towards like the psychology portion. I find deception research really, really interesting. So like placebo stuff, so cool because it's like if you look into the research, it's like you can give people like fake surgeries and they'll be healed. It's like
the power of your
I'm ready for this.
When we were talking about like about going onto our cycles for the first time, I was like, I know that like a portion of that is definitely a placebo effect.
Yeah.
For sure. Like when we start our cycles, I know that there's at least a little bit of it.
There was one study, I cannot remember the name of the person right now, but there was like these power lifters who were like not supposed to take anything, and then they like did it, and it was like fake stuff. Like it wasn't real. Like they got it from their coach, and their coach just like gave them like saline or something stupid, and like their numbers went up like so crazy because of like they thought they were on something.
Like,
and then their coach was like, "Hey, guess what? You guys didn't take anything," and then they lost all of their gains. I don't remember where I read this, but I will find it, and I will find it so you guys can like
so
after.
much.
It's just insane
Yeah.
how much your mind impacts literally everything that your body does.
It does.
It's
I
amazing.
agree. It's nuts.
Another, I'm just gonna like drop research right now. Another one of my favorite ones is like there was this milkshake study, and it's like they had these 2 milkshakes, and they're like one of these is like super lean, super healthy, only like 100 calories. And the other one's like, oh, this is like indulgent, like this is like 600-700 calorie shake. You're gonna feel like amazing after this.
Yeah.
They were both the exact same. The researchers tested their ghrelin and leptin levels, so like the hunger hormones, and they actually changed based off of what they thought they were getting instead of the actual calories taken in. So like my brain's like, I would love to do that with competitors, like give competitors like 100 calories of like a shake or something like that, and then like tell them it's 1,000 calorie free meal and see what happens. Like I would be so curious.
Yeah. No, I wonder if you did the opposite, like if that would work too.
That could be such a prep hack. Like, actually, I feel like coaches low key do this. They deceive their athletes, not us, but like I feel like we have seen some coaches' meal plans of athletes that come to us, and they're just like not getting the results they want, and they show us what they've been doing, and their coach has them on a 1,500 calorie meal plan. You calculate it all out, it's actually like 800 calories.
Yeah.
Dang.
And so it's like, no wonder why you're feeling like crap because your coach is telling you you're eating this much, but you're actually eating this much. But the fact that they were like progressing the way that they were only on 800 calories, it's like, wow, that mental component, like they thought they were eating that much.
Man, there's so much. And then like when it just like makes you like want to like dive into your own mental too. Like
I feel like training's a great place for that.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like just learning that again, which I'm so stoked for.
Where did I learn this? I feel like I learned this somewhere. The pain threshold. Someone talked about it on a podcast.
It was Justin, his athlete Sky, right?
Yeah. That it's all mental.
Yep.
That is the coolest, sickest thing ever.
Actually, you told me something about that you can turn pain into pleasure.
Yeah, so the receptors that we have, it's like the nociceptors.
Yes.
I remember. They, it's like we usually perceive these as pain, but people can actually like translate that and like train themselves to perceive it as pleasure. You can see that in like extreme cases with some people of like BDSM stuff. You can also see it with like there are some women during like childbirth, they'll like instead of experiencing it super painfully, they'll experience it like super pleasurefully, which sounds like a much better alternative. So you can train yourself.
How did you do that?
But it's crazy what you can start to just like perceive and change, because they are both just like the same. It's still just a stimulus when you break it down. It's like it is not pain, it is not pleasure. Like there's just labels we put on them.
What you frame it as.
Yeah, because it's just a sensation. What are you going to do with it?
That's such an easy like mental hack when you go into a training session. Like you don't have to like push past the pain. You just gotta tell yourself it's not painful.
This doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
I love this.
I'm not failing right now.
One of my things to do with my athletes who have like struggle with like training hard, like it's like really painful for them, and I can empathize with that. Like I was definitely like that at some point where it's like, oh, I don't want to hurt myself, and it's like, okay, like what if we just like took the pain and we just like kind of looked at it, it's like just like kind of like separated ourselves from it instead of like going into the ocean. We just like watch it from the shore and like watch the waves crash. It's like if you do that with your pain, it's like you can just be like, oh, there's some pain there. This is interesting, and then you're like, oh, it's getting bigger, and then at some point, like obviously you can't just like dissociate like that all of the time, but sometimes it's like separating yourself and just looking at it fully can just help you kind of like get to those new levels and be like, oh, it wasn't actually that bad,
Yeah. Wow, I like that. I've never thought about it with your ocean, your highway thing, it's really working. Yeah.
These analogies.
I know. She got all the analogies.
That
love
is
that.
super cool.
So you talked about your one study. I just want to touch on your other study. Was it with, it was with post-show blues, right?
Yes, that's kind of how we're framing it as now. So we've had many case studies that are going over like some of the blood work stuff, like some of the things that we changed throughout prep. So like, what did you start with macros and what did you end with macros? Where did your cardio end up? What did your resting metabolic rate do? And then after that, like you just kind of like compare those things. But I haven't seen a study go over psychological measures before. So for this case study, we had her take, this was a sports motivation questionnaire. So it's like, how motivated are you? Like, how enthusiastic are you? How committed are you to your sport right now? Then there is like the general anxiety and depression and somatic experience questionnaire. So they use that for people who have experienced depression or anxiety. And then the third one we had was a emotional eating. So like disordered eating questionnaire. And then just kind of asked her about those things throughout prep. And again, I can't disclose what the answers were, but it is really interesting because I feel like there hasn't been that perspective on it. There's been a couple of studies about like when athletes, like in other sports, like swimmers, for example, will finish their season and then they kind of have this like depressive experience after. It's like, oh no, my goal's taken away. Like now, like there's a sense of identity almost lost. It's like, now what do I do? But we anecdotally experienced this as bodybuilders, like, oh, like the post-show blues are very, very common, but we haven't like seen it. So I'm excited when that study comes out for people to see it.
I'm excited for the eating disorder part too. Mm-hmm. That's super interesting. Since that's so common.
Yeah.
And we've all been there.
I think it'll also be a really interesting study as far as health markers go, because we did measure her blood markers pre and post. And I think it will hopefully help some athletes as far as being in a good place to start a prep. Because sometimes if things are not in a great place to begin with, like there's something underlying that like maybe wasn't addressed before prep started, and then it influences your prep later on. You can kind of see how those things all connect. It's like a really crazy story what we're going to tell with this case study. Yeah. But I think that it will just start to shed some light on things in new, different ways that we haven't looked at them in the research lens before.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
That'll be very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm excited for all this research.
Yeah. Pull it out right now. Let me see. That's going to be super fun.
I'm super interested in that. I think like marrying the bodybuilding and like psychology worlds together.
You can't separate them.
No, you can't. They're
like try. Like
they're so interconnected. All
mental.
as coaches, like it's so much more mental than just like giving people protocols and telling them what to do. If you want to be a good coach,
exactly.
and you want people
almost
to
like 80-90% mental.
Yeah, it really is.
To be honest.
Yeah.
That's very true.
And I think sometimes maybe this is shifting and it's moving away, but it's almost easier to like dissociate from the mental aspect of it. Like bodybuilding is very, very mental, but like the physical pieces of it are almost like easy. Like training's not easy, but it is easy to like get onto your protocol and just stick with it because you just have the plan. And it's also easy to shut off like any of the emotional turmoil that you might be feeling and just be like, well, I'm just going to go to the gym because I'm supposed to, instead of really like tuning in. So I'm really excited that research is looking at it.
Yeah.
In this light.
Yeah.
And it's going to help us as coaches too. Just
one last thing I'll slide in there too, as far as like the research on bodybuilders and people who are like very physique oriented, is that it doesn't get a lot of funding and it doesn't get a lot of attention put on it because people don't think it's like as important. And I can see it from a certain lens being like, oh, like these people don't have cancer and they don't have sarcopenia, so their muscles aren't like wasting away, and then it's like, it's like we're just helping jack people look jacked. But it's like what you're just saying here, it's like there are underlying pieces. Like there is like a certain level of dissociation. There is a certain level of depression and anxiety and all of these things that people experience. And like maybe just like putting a little bit more emphasis on the experiences that these people have, and especially in a research capacity, is helpful.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. I just love it all.
I know. I'm excited. I'm very excited. Well, is there anything that did you want to say something?
No.
Okay. Is there anything that we didn't ask you about that you'd like to talk freely on?
No,
in
I
the
think that
research?
was amazing. You guys contributed like so much. Thank you so much. I learned a lot.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you taught us a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I
We're
feel
very excited for all the research that is to
Mhm.
come.
Yes, me too.
sweet. Well, thank you so much. And thank you guys for tuning in. We will catch you on the next episode.
I hope y'all really enjoyed the podcast today, leaving it feeling more relentless than ever. But we have a few things that we would love to ask of you, so I'm going to give this over to Noah.
Thank you guys so much for listening. If you could, I know that this is your new favorite podcast. Please leave a 5-star rating and review. Leave any comments and questions below. And make sure that you're sharing across social media so that all of your friends get to listen to the greatest podcast on earth.
And if you have any questions about any topics that we talk about or anything at all, fitness, competing related, anything, we comment, we'll hit you back up Instagram or in the podcast under, if the comment box is there, then we will definitely answer your questions and help you out as best as we can.
Absolutely. So leave those 5-star reviews. Let us know. And we'll talk to y'all again soon.
Have a relentless day.
Bye.